of the bladder. Okay, so again, you have this one, the right ureter, and this one, the left ureter. Now down here, where I'm writing a number 3, oh, that's a sloppy number 3. There we go. Number 3 is going to be the urinary bladder. So this is going to be the bowl or the sac that collects all the urine, and when that sac, called the urinary bladder, gets full, then you'll have a sensation to go and urinate, and then the bladder will empty. Okay, so the urine is going to leave the bladder through one tube, and you'll see it down here. I'm putting a green circle around it. That is your urethra. Okay, the urethra is a tube that leads the urine from the bladder to the external environment. And the way to keep the urethra and the ureters separate is if you say I have a pen, you have one pen. If you say I have a book, you have one book. So the urethra ends in an A, so there's only one A urethra, okay? Make sure you can label these on the model that looks like this. You will see it on the model and not on a picture like this, okay? So again, make sure you can label this with this or on this torso model. Okay, so now we're going to go into the models themselves. Okay, so our first model we're going to talk about is the kidney. So this organ or gland is going to be our kidney. So this is the outside of the kidney. And on this side, our outside part has been cut away so we can see the internal structures of the kidney. So all of this is going to be your kidney. And the tube leading out of the kidney down here is your ureter. Now, just like in our lymph node and our adrenal gland, you have a capsule, a cortex, and a medulla, okay? So on the outside here, this is your fibrous capsule. It's the capsule on the outside of the kidney, fibrous capsule. Then this outside layer is going to be the renal cortex. So this general area out here is going to be the renal cortex. This general area here is going to be the renal medulla. Okay? So again, fibrous capsule, renal cortex, and renal medulla. Okay. Now, when our ureter comes in and it'll broaden out right here, this area right here is called our renal pelvis. And then our renal pelvis is going to branch into our major calyx. Okay, so the first branch off of the renal pelvis is going to be our major calyx, here and here. Then our major calyx is going to split and branch again, forming these minor calyxes. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 minor calyxes right here. Okay, so again, down here is your ureter. Right here is your renal pelvis. The first branching off is your major calyx. And then the end or terminal branches are called your minor calyxes. Okay. Your minor calyxes are going to meet with these structures here, these fan structures. These fan structures are called your renal pyramids. So this pink fan structure here is called your renal pyramid. So how do you know when they're asking you the renal medulla versus the pyramid? If they ask you this general area, they're talking about the renal medulla. If they put a sticker here and they say, identify this specific structure, they're talking about the renal pyramid, okay? Now the renal pyramid is going to meet this minor calyx, and you see that you have this little indented area right here. This is going to be your renal papillae. So where your pyramid goes into that minor calyx and you form that indented lip area right there, that is your renal papillae. Okay. Now between these renal pyramids, you can see a tan area right here. So it's not pink like your renal pyramid. So oops, here and here, where it's pink is your renal pyramid. Right here, it's tan, just like the cortex. This tan area between the renal pyramids is called your renal column. So there's a renal column right here underneath these arteries. There would be a renal column underneath these artery and vein, and a renal column underneath this artery and vein, and a renal column right here underneath this artery and vein. Okay, so in between your pyramids, underneath the artery and vein, you're going to have the renal columns. Now, between your minor calyxes, this area between the minor calyxes is called your renal sinus. So you can see a really good area right here. This space between the minor calyxes, again, is your renal sinus. So there's another renal sinus between these two minor calyxes. There's a renal sinus between this one, and there's a renal sinus between this one and this one, okay? It's just that space between your minor calyxes. Okay, this structure right here, each of these structures with these little squirrely loops, this is called a nephron, and we'll talk further about a nephron in the next model. This is your renal artery and your renal vein. Then the artery and veins that go between the pyramids is called your interlobular artery and vein, because they're kind of between the two lobes called pyramids, okay? So again, these between the pyramids, the artery and veins, are called your interlobular artery and vein. The artery and vein that arcs over the top of the pyramid, this is your arcuate artery and vein. So again, they're going to arc over the top of the pyramid. So arcuate artery and vein. Then you have these arteries and veins. They're going to radiate through the cortex. These are called your cortical radiate arteries and veins. So again, these between the pyramids, interlobular artery and vein. These that arc over the pyramids are called your arcuate artery and vein. And then these that radiate through the cortex are called your cortical radiate artery and vein. Now looking kind of at the back side here, you see this indented area of the kidney where your ureter is going to come in and your renal artery and vein are going to come in. This area is called the hilum. Just like in the lymph node, when you had the efferent vessel coming out and you had the artery and vein, okay? So same thing here, just like the lymph node, this indented area where you have your arteries and veins coming in and you have the tube coming in, or coming out, excuse me. This is going to be called your hilum, from here to here, hilum. Okay. And now we'll go to our next model. Okay, so this is the next model we'll be talking about. So you'll see there are 3 different parts to it. So let's talk about this one here. This is showing all the parts that we just talked about in the previous model. So again, you have the whole thing is called a kidney. This tube coming into the, or exiting the kidney, is called your ureter. This swollen area right here where the ureter is leaving the kidney, this is called the renal pelvis. You have your renal artery and your renal vein. The renal pelvis is going to branch into the major calyx. So here you're seeing a major calyx, and here would be a major calyx. And then your major calyx is going to split into your minor calyx. And then you'll see you have the renal pyramids, which are the fan structures. Where the renal pyramid goes to the minor calyx, this little indented lip is called your renal papillae. So you can see your renal papillae are at the base of each pyramid. And then right here, this little circle right here is also a renal papillae. Okay. So at the base of each pyramid, and then this little circle, it's called a renal papillae. The area between each of the pyramids is called your renal column. So you can see a good renal column right here. You can see another good renal column right here. It's just the area between your renal pyramids, okay? So right here, all of this would be your renal column. Now the space between minor calyxes, so yeah, all this space right here, all of this space right here, and then again between the minor calyxes here, these are going to be called your renal sinuses. Okay. Now the arteries and veins going between the renal pyramid, these are going to be your interlobular artery and veins. Then the arteries and veins that arc over the pyramids are going to be your arcuate arteries and veins. And then the arteries and veins that radiate outward through the cortex are going to be called your cortical radiate artery and vein. You have your fibrous capsule around the outside. This general area here is called your renal cortex. And then all of this area in here, general area, is going to be called the renal medulla. And then again, you can kind of see it on this model. It's a little bit harder. But this area right here, where you have the indented area of the kidney, where your ureter and your artery and veins come in or go out, this area is going to be your hilum. Okay. This right here is going to be a nephron, and we're going to cut from here to here. We're going to make a triangular cut, and we're going to take this area right here and we're going to blow it up, and we're going to look at it here. So here you're seeing, again, you have the fibrous capsule. This general area up here is called the renal cortex. And all of this dark pink down here is called your renal medulla. Now you'll see you have a short nephron. This short nephron is called a cortical nephron. And then the long nephron is called the juxtamedullary nephron. Juxta means next to. So this one, a long part of this loop is going to lie next to or within the medulla. Okay, so juxtamedullary nephron is the long one, and cortical nephron is going to be the short one. Now this entire structure is going to be called your renal corpuscle, and your renal corpuscle is composed of two parts. You have on the very inside here, you can see one here and here. We have cut away the white outside covering. The little red tubules inside here are called the glomerulus, and the white capsule is the glomerular capsule. Okay, so this entire structure, the white glomerular capsule plus the glomerulus, is called a renal corpuscle. This specific structure on the inside here, the red lines, this is going to be the glomerulus, and the white capsule on the outside is going to be called the glomerular capsule. Okay. You have the tubules coming off of the capsule. These tubules are called your proximal convoluted tubules. So proximal because they're the closest to the glomerular or to the renal corpuscle. Convoluted because they're winding and twisting, almost folded like. Okay, so again, this white tubule that is wrinkly and folded right here that comes off of the renal corpuscle is called your proximal convoluted tubule. Then this whole loop is called your nephron loop, also called the loop of Henle, nephron loop or the loop of Henle. Then you have these folded tubules here. These are further away from this renal corpuscle, so these are going to be called your distal convoluted tubules because they're more distant. Okay, so proximal convoluted tubules, the nephron loop, also called the loop of Henle, and up here is going to be your distal convoluted tubule. And the distal convoluted tubules from both nephrons are going to go into this long, thick white line. This is going to be called your collecting duct. So this big one right here in the middle is going to be called your collecting duct, okay? Because it's going to be collecting all of the waste product, the urine, from this kidney so that it can dump it into the ureters and take it to the bladder. So this is your collecting duct, okay? You have this capillary bed right here. This capillary bed is called your peritubular capillaries because you can see it's going to be in the vicinity of your proximal and distal capillary, or proximal and distal tubules. So it's going to be around those tubules. So again, this capillary bed up here is going to be called your peritubular. Peri means around, tubular. So they're around these tubules, right? Peritubular capillaries. Then the capillaries down here in the medulla, this capillary bed is called your vasa recta. So the capillary bed in the cortex is called your peritubular capillaries. The capillary bed down here in your medulla is going to be called your vasa recta. Okay. Now you have, let me stand up so I can show you. Let it clear up there. Okay, so you have here, I'll tell you what, let me do it over here because you can see it just a little bit better. Okay, so you can see you have these cortical radiate arteries right here. The cortical radiate artery is going to then branch and it's going to go into the renal corpuscle. So this artery going into the renal corpuscle, this one is going to be your afferent arteriole. Afferent because it's going into, okay? So afferent arteriole right here. Then leaving this renal corpuscle and going out is your efferent arteriole. So again, this is going to be our cortical radiate artery and vein. And then it will split and you'll see this little arteriole right here. This one is going into the renal corpuscle. So this one is called our afferent arteriole. Then we have an arteriole leaving the renal corpuscle. This is our efferent arteriole. Okay. Now we're going to take just this area right here, this renal corpuscle, and then we're going to blow it up and look at it over here. Oops. Okay, before we go on to the renal corpuscle over here, when we're talking about this loop of Henle or this nephron loop, remember this, these tubules are called your proximal convoluted tubules because they come straight off of your renal corpuscle. And then they're going to go down. So this is going to be your descending loop or your, okay. So descending limb of the loop. And this is your ascending limb. So again, all of this is your nephron loop or loop of Henle. Going down from the renal corpuscle is called your descending limb. And this is your ascending limb, like a limb of a tree, okay? Descending limb comes off of the proximal convoluted tubule, descending limb. You go around the loop and you start going back up. So this is the ascending limb, okay? So now we are going to take one of these renal corpuscles over here, and we are going to blow that renal corpuscle up and look at it over here. So over here, you're seeing a renal corpuscle. So Everything within that circle that you can still see that I'm not covering up, that is your renal corpuscle. And your renal corpuscle is made up of your glomerular capsule and these red tubules called your glomerulus. So this is your glomerulus, and around the outside is your glomerular capsule. Now the space between the glomerular capsule and the glomerulus, this space is called your capsular space. Okay. So again, the entire circle, sorry about that, the entire circular structure that I am not covering up is called your renal corpuscle. And your renal corpuscle is made up of this glomerular capsule and this wadded up tubular structure called your glomerulus. Okay. The cells that make up this capsule, okay, the cells are called capsular epithelium. Okay. So if I say, what is this structure? This structure is a glomerular capsule. If I say, what is this cell? See that? What is this cell? It's going to be capsular epithelium. Okay. Now you have this skin set type cells right here on top of the glomerulus. And you can see them here. They're a light yellowish beige. These cells are going to be your capsular epithelium. It's just like a protective skin layer that go over this glomerulus. So this side, the capsular epithelium has been removed, and this side, these yellow cells here are called your capsule, or sorry, your I think I said capsular epithelium. I'm sorry. This is your visceral epithelium. Okay, so capsular epithelium are these cells. And this covering of cells here is called your visceral epithelium. Capsular epithelium, visceral epithelium. Now this tube coming off of the renal corpuscle is our proximal convoluted tubule. Remember, your proximal convoluted tubule comes off of the renal corpuscle itself. Okay. And then all of this up here that I am not covering, so all of this up here, is called your Juxtaglomerular Complex. Juxta because it's next to the glomerulus. So juxtaglomerular, and it's a complex because it has 3 different parts here, okay? Juxtaglomerular Complex. So this structure up here is going to be our distal convoluted tubule, and the cells that make up our distal convoluted tubule, you see those cells right there? Those are going to be our macula densa. So the cells of this distal convoluted tubule are called the macula densa. So if I say, what is this structure? This structure is the distal convoluted tubule. If I say, what are these cells are called macula densa. Now this is the arteriole coming into the renal corpuscle. So this structure is going to be called our afferent arteriole, and this one coming out is going to be our efferent arteriole. The cells that make up this arteriole, so these cells right here, they're going to be called juxtaglomerular cells because they're in this juxtaglomerular complex. Okay, juxtaglomerular cells. Okay. So again, everything in this circle right here that I am not covering up is called the renal corpuscle. The renal corpuscle is made up of the capsular epithelium and the glomerulus. Between the space between the capsule and the glomerulus is your capsular space. The cells of the capsule are called your capsular epithelium. The cells covering the glomerulus are called your visceral epithelium. This tubule coming off down here is called your afferent convoluted tubule. All of this up here that I'm not covering up, this is going to be your juxtaglomerular complex, and it's made up of your distal convoluted tubule up here, your afferent tubule, or sorry, your afferent arteriole, and your efferent arteriole. So distal convoluted tubule. The bigger one is your afferent arteriole. The smaller one is your efferent arteriole. The cells of your distal convoluted tubule are called the macula densa, and the cells of the afferent arteriole are called your juxtaglomerular cells.